The Black Hawk's rotors cut through North African darkness like a blade through silk. Lieutenant Kira Blackwood gripped the fast rope with calloused hands, her HK-416 carbine pressed tight against her tactical vest. 72 hours ago, she'd been stateside planning a quiet weekend. Now she hung suspended above a terrorist compound where 15 Americans waited to die. 30 seconds. The pilot's voice crackled through her headset. Kira glanced at her team. 6 SEALs, their faces painted black eyes hidden behind PVS-31 night vision goggles that turned darkness into green-tinted day. They'd trained together for 3 years, bled together, trusted each other with secrets deeper than classified operations. Tonight, they'd prove that trust once more. The helicopter descended fast, staying below radar coverage. Hostile territory stretched beneath them 300 miles from the nearest friendly forces. No backup, no margin for error. Just 6 warriors against an unknown number of armed hostiles holding a Marine colonel and 14 of his men. Go, go, go! Kira dropped through the night rope, burning through her gloves despite the Kevlar reinforcement. Her boots hit sand-covered concrete at 031 scene hours. The team spread into tactical formation without a word, moving like shadows toward the compound's outer wall. She checked her carbine. Suppressor attached. Magazine loaded with 62-grain ammunition designed for maximum stopping power with minimal overpenetration. The AQOG optic glowed faintly in her night vision, crosshairs steady. Breacher moved forward with shaped charges. 30 seconds to plant, 20 seconds to clear the blast radius, 10 seconds until hell opened its doors. The explosion came muted professional. Kira flowed through the gap with her team weapon up, scanning sectors. First room clear, second room clear, third room movement. Her finger found the trigger. 2-round center mass. The hostile dropped before his AK-47 cleared leather. The suppressed shots sounded like harsh coughs in the confined space. Contact left, her point man called. 3 more hostiles rushed from a doorway, weapons blazing. Unsuppressed AK fire shattered the night muzzle flashes, destroying their own night vision. Amateur's mistake. Fatal mistake. Kira dropped to one knee, found her first target through the ACOG. Squeezed. The hostile's head snapped back. Shifted aim. Squeezed. Second hostile down. Her teammate took the third with a precise double tap. Hostages located basement level, came the call through her earpiece. They moved deeper into the compound. Every corner a potential ambush. Every shadow a possible threat. This was the work SEALs trained for, the reason they endured Hell Week in the freezing Pacific, and instructors who seemed determined to break them. The basement stairs descended into darkness, even their night vision struggled to penetrate. Kira went first, carbine leading the way, trusting her training more than her sight. Colonel Raymond Hale sat zip-tied to a chair, blood crusting his face from a deep gash above his eye. 14 Marines surrounded him, all restrained, all showing signs of interrogation, but alive, still breathing, still worth saving. U.S. Navy, Kira announced quietly, "We're getting you out." Hale looked up, and despite the pain, despite the situation, something like hope flickered in his eyes. About damn time. Her team moved efficiently, cutting restraints, performing rapid medical assessments. Hale needed support to stand, his left leg badly damaged. Kira moved to his side without hesitation. "Can you walk?" "Can I stop you if I can't?" Hale managed a grim smile. "No, sir." That's when the world exploded. An RPG round hit the building's upper floor. The ceiling shuddered. Dust and debris rained down. Someone shouted in Arabic above them. Multiple voices, many more than 4. "Exfil now," Kira commanded. "We've got company." They moved toward the exit, Kira supporting Hale's weight, her carbine in one hand or tin. Not ideal, not even close to ideal, but SEALs didn't wait for ideal circumstances. The compound had transformed into a war zone. Hostiles poured from buildings they'd cleared minutes earlier. Hidden rooms, concealed tunnels. The intelligence had been wrong about enemy numbers. Kira's team laid down suppressing fire-controlled bursts that conserved ammunition while keeping hostile heads down. They bounded backward toward the extraction point, 2 providing cover, while 4 moved, then switching. An AK round snapped past Kira's head so close she felt the pressure wave. She pivoted, spotted the shooter on a second-story balcony. Raised her carbine one-handed, Hale still supported by her other arm. The ACOG settled on the hostile's chest. One shot, 75 yards, one-handed. The hostel toppled backward. "Blackwood, we need to move," her point man shouted. She could hear the Black Hawk approaching rotors thudding in the distance. 100 yards to the extraction point. Might as well be 100 miles. Another hostile rounded a corner directly in front of them. Too close for rifles. Kira released Hale, her hand flashing to the Randall Model 1 knife on her belt. Her father's knife. The blade had ended threats in Grenada and Panama. Tonight it worked again. The hostile dropped and Kira reclaimed Hale before he could fall. 50 yards to extraction. An explosion to her left. Grenade. Shrapnel tore through the air. Kira felt fire along her left side just below her tactical vest. Ignored it. Pain was information, not an obstacle. 25 yards. The Black Hawk touched down, door gunner unleashing hell from the minigun, 6,000 rounds per minute, turning the compound into a kill zone. Kira's team reached the helicopter loading hostages, first pulling them aboard with urgent efficiency. Kira pushed Hale toward the door. Friendly hands grabbed him, hauled him to safety. "Get in!" the pilot screamed. She turned back. One of her teammates was down, dragging himself toward the helicopter with one arm, his leg useless. Kira sprinted back, bullets kicking up sand around her boots. Grabbed his vest. Pulled. An RPG streaked through the air where the helicopter had been hovering seconds earlier. The pilot had seen it coming, dropped altitude, the rocket passing overhead close enough to feel the heat. Kira threw her teammate through the door, then followed friendly hands, grabbing her vest and hauling her aboard as the Black Hawk lifted, rising fast into the safety of altitude and darkness. Only then did she look down at her side. Blood soaked through her uniform, dark and spreading. The shrapnel had found flesh. The team medic moved immediately, cutting away fabric, applying pressure. "Through and through. You're lucky." Kira didn't feel lucky. She felt alive. That was close enough. Colonel Hale sat across from her Navy corpsman, working on his leg. Their eyes met. "Thank you," he said simply. Kira nodded. Words weren't necessary. The mission spoke for itself. The Black Hawk carried them towards safety, toward debriefing, toward the endless paperwork that followed successful operations. Kira closed her eyes, let the adrenaline drain away, felt the wound in her side pulse with her heartbeat. 72 hours from now, she'd be stateside again. Maybe that quiet weekend was still possible. She had no idea how wrong that assumption would prove. 3 days later, San Diego welcomed her with perfect weather and the kind of California sunshine that made you forget places like North Africa existed. Kira stood in her apartment, staring at the dress uniform hanging in her closet. The Navy Cross ceremony was scheduled for next month. Classified, of course. Only a handful of officers would attend. No press, no publicity. Just quiet recognition for a mission that officially never happened. That suited her fine. Her father had received his medals the same way. Commander Nathaniel Blackwood, Navy SEAL, killed in action, 1985. The official story was a training accident, helicopter mechanical failure during a routine exercise. Kira had been 7 years old, standing at his funeral, watching the flag-draped coffin lowered into earth at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery. She'd known even then that something was wrong with the story. Training accidents didn't result in closed casket funerals. Training accidents didn't require 3 officers to visit your mother with documents marked classified. Training accidents didn't haunt the eyes of the SEALs who came to pay their respects. Men who looked at 7-year-old Kira like she represented something they'd lost and could never recover. Her father's dog tag sat on her dresser, tarnished silver that had touched his skin through operations she'd never know about. Beside them, his Randall Model 1 knife, the leather grip worn smooth by decades of use. These were her inheritance. These and the training his teammates had given her after he died. Colonel Diane Ashford had been one of those teammates, though her relationship with Nathaniel Blackwood had been different. While he'd been running covert operations with SEAL Team 6, she'd been flying U-2 spy planes over Soviet territory at 70,000 feet, photographing installations that could end the world. The first black female pilot to fly the Dragon Lady, they'd called her. A legend in her own right. After Nathaniel's death, Diane had appeared at their doorstep with a promise. "Your father asked me to watch over you if anything happened. I keep my promises." She taught Kira things the Navy wouldn't teach for another 15 years. How to read terrain like a book. How to assess threats 3 moves ahead. How to transform fear into fuel. When Kira had announced her intention to join the Navy, Diane hadn't discouraged her. When she declared she was trying out for SEAL training, Diane had simply asked, Are you doing this to honor your father or to prove something to yourself? Kira had thought about that question through every frozen night of Hell Week, through every evolution designed to break her through the knowing looks from instructors who saw her as a publicity stunt rather than a warrior. The answer had come during the final week when she'd carried a telephone pole with her boat crew through soft sand lungs, burning legs, screaming instructors shouting that she was slowing everyone down. She'd looked at her teammates, seen their exhaustion matching her own, and understood. She wasn't there to honor her father's memory. She wasn't there to prove women could be SEALs. She was there because when her teammates needed someone to carry the weight, she could do it, would do it, had done it. That realization had transformed everything. The wound in her side ached as she changed into civilian clothes. Jeans, leather jacket to hide the bandages, boots that could run if necessary. The Navy corpsman had done good work with the stitches, but healing took time. Time she didn't want to spend in her apartment alone with memories and what-ifs. The Anchor Down sat 3 miles from Coronado Naval Base, a bar that catered to military personnel with enough sense to value a good whiskey over cheap beer. Master Chief Webster ran the place, a veteran who'd served on riverboats in the Mekong Delta before most of the current patrons were born. He nodded at Kira when she entered, already reaching for the maker's mark. No words, no questions. Just a neat whiskey delivered to her usual corner booth, back to the wall, eyes on the door. Old habits from a father she barely remembered. Habits that had kept her alive in places she couldn't discuss. The whiskey burned, going down, warmth spreading through her chest. She savored it, let her mind drift away from classified operations and stitched wounds and the faces of 2 civilian contractors who died 3 days ago. Thomas Brennan and Kyle Donovan. Former military, both of them. Security contractors officially. The kind of men who showed up on manifests with vague job descriptions and security clearances that prevented questions. They'd been in the compound when her team arrived. Already dead. Grenade blast at close range. The hostiles had been interrogating them separately from the Marines, which struck Kira as odd. Why separate them? What made 2 contractors more interesting than a Marine colonel? Questions she had no authority to ask. Questions that would be answered in classified debriefings she'd never attend. She pushed the thoughts away, focused on the whiskey, on the comfortable anonymity of the bar. Just another patron. Just another face in a room full of warriors trying to forget what they'd seen and done. That anonymity lasted exactly 14 minutes. The door crashed open hard enough to rattle the Anchor Down's windows. 6 Marines poured through, already drunk, already loud, already looking for something they wouldn't find at the bottom of another bottle. Kira recognized the type immediately. Young, fit, full of themselves. The kind who'd done one deployment and thought they understood war. The kind who talked loudest about things they knew least about. Their leader stood 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle and attitude. Staff Sergeant's chevrons on his sleeves, swagger in his walk that said he owned whatever room he entered. Staff Sergeant Wyatt Carson scanned the bar like a predator, assessing territory. His eyes landed on Kira, lingered, and something ugly flickered across his face. Recognition. "Well, well," Carson announced to his companion's voice carrying across the bar. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence. The Navy's poster child for diversity and inclusion." His Marines laughed on cue. Corporals Rourke, Sullivan, Hendricks, Wallace, and Garrett. Young men following a leader who was leading them somewhere stupid. Kira took another sip of whiskey. Ignored them. She'd faced worse than drunk Marines with fragile egos. Carson wasn't finished. He made his way to the bar, ordered shots for his crew, but kept his attention on Kira. "I saw you on CNN, that interview about women in special operations. Very inspiring, very progressive." His tone made those words sound like insults. "Tell me something," Carson continued, louder now, playing to his audience. "Did you actually complete Bud's training, or did they create a special photo shoot version just for you?" The bar had gone quiet. Other patrons watched, waiting to see how this would play out. Kira met Carson's eyes. "I'm just here for a drink, Sergeant, not looking for trouble." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Carson pushed off the bar, took a step toward her booth. "You're not looking for trouble. You're looking for headlines and medal ceremonies and congressional testimony about breaking barriers." His Marines spread out, slightly emboldened by alcohol and their sergeant's confidence. They weren't threatening yet. Not quite. But the potential hung in the air like cordite. In the far corner of the bar, a woman in civilian clothes watched the scene unfold. Late 50s black with the kind of posture that spoke of military service and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. She sat perfectly still, a glass of gin and tonic untouched before her. Colonel Diane Ashford, retired, looked every bit the U-2 pilot who'd flown reconnaissance missions over hostile territory with nothing but her skill and a prayer between her and Soviet surface-to-air missiles. She caught Kira's eye, the slightest shake of her head. Not yet. Carson approached Kira's table emboldened by her silence. You know what I think? I think standards got lowered. I think someone in Washington decided they needed good publicity more than they needed good warriors. Kira set down her whiskey glass with careful precision. Sergeant Carson. Oh, she knows my name. Carson grinned at his Marines. Must have studied up on the local heroes. The real warriors. The ones who didn't need special accommodations. Your father served in Beirut, Kira said quietly. 1983. Marine barracks bombing. 241 killed. He survived because he was on perimeter patrol that morning. Carson's grin faltered. How do you? He received the Navy Cross for pulling 3 wounded Marines from burning rubble while the building collapsed around him. He's a genuine hero. You should consider honoring his legacy instead of disgracing it. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Carson's face flushed red, his jaw clenched. Whatever game he'd been playing just became personal. You don't get to talk about my father, he said, voice low and dangerous. Then you don't get to talk about my qualifications, Kira replied evenly. Carson's hand shot out, knocked her whiskey glass off the table. It shattered on the floor, glass and liquor spreading across worn wood. Oops, Carson said. Clumsy of me. His Marines moved closer, forming a loose semicircle around Kira's booth. Not quite surrounding her, not quite blocking the exits, but close enough to make their intentions clear. Master Chief Webster reached for the phone behind the bar. Military police response time from Coronado was 8 minutes. A lot could happen in 8 minutes. Kira assessed the situation with the calm that came from 3 combat tours and training that had pushed her past the point where fear controlled decision-making. 6 hostiles, confined space, she was injured carrying concealed at her ankle. Her Sig Sauer P226 held 15 rounds, more than enough to stop the threat. But using a firearm in a crowded bar was a last resort. Beyond last resort. Unthinkable unless lives were in immediate danger. These weren't hostiles. They were drunk Marines making bad decisions. There was a difference. Carson planted his palms on her table, leaned in close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. You know what? I don't think you're the real deal. I think you're a PR stunt in a uniform. So why don't you show us what they taught you in that watered-down training program? Kira stood slowly, deliberately. The movement made her wound pulse with pain, but she kept it off her face. Last chance to walk away, Sergeant. Walk away, Carson laughed. No one's saving you now, sweetheart. Time to find out what you're really made of. He reached for her collar fingers, grasping fabric. The next 40 seconds would become legend at Coronado Naval Base, discussed in hushed tones by warriors who understood what they were witnessing. Kira's movement was so smooth it seemed casual. Her hand intercepted Carson's wrist, twisted with precise force. His arm bent behind his back at an angle joints weren't designed to accommodate. Before he could process what was happening, his face slammed into the table where her drink had been. I wasn't trained as a SEAL because I'm a woman, Kira said quietly. I was trained as a SEAL because I was already a warrior. Corporals Rourke and Sullivan lunged forward together, mistaking numbers for advantage. Amateur mistake. Fatal in real combat. Kira released Carson with a sharp push that sent him stumbling backward into Corporal Hendricks. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs. She pivoted smoothly, using Carson's body as a counterweight, her right leg snapping out in a calculated kick that caught Rourke in the solar plexus. He folded like paper. Sullivan swung a wide hook, the kind of punch that looked impressive in movies and got you killed in real fights. Kira dropped below it, swept his legs. He hit the floor hard enough to crack his head against wood. Corporal Hendricks had untangled himself from Carson, was circling to her wounded side. Smart. He had training beyond basic Marine combatives. Boxing, maybe. His stance suggested discipline. He threw a tight combination. Jab, cross hook. Professional technique. But Kira had been taught by warriors who'd fought in places where losing meant dying. She slipped the jab, blocked the cross, caught the hook on her forearm. Pain flared from her side wound, but she channeled it used. It drove her heel into his instep with enough force to fracture small bones. Hendricks gasped, weight shifting off the injured foot. Kira swept his other leg. He went down. Corporal Wallace grabbed her from behind, arms locking around her torso, squeezing. His forearm pressed directly against her wound. Agony exploded through her side, white-hot and all-consuming. Some people froze when hit with serious pain. SEALs were trained to do the opposite. Kira drove her heel down onto Wallace's instep, felt something crunch. His grip loosened fractionally. She snapped her head backward, felt the solid impact of skull on nose, felt warm blood spray across her neck as cartilage shattered. Wallace released her, stumbling, back hands clutching his ruined nose. Corporals Garrett and one other Marine she'd lost track in the chaos rushed her together. Desperation replacing strategy. Numbers replacing technique. Kira caught the first with a joint lock that hyperextended his elbow, sent him screaming to his knees. The second received a precise strike to a pressure point at his neck. His legs went weak. She guided him down almost gently, ensuring he didn't crack his skull on the floor. Carson had recovered rage overriding common sense. He came at her with a knife, a K-bar fighting blade that had no business being in a bar fight. The situation had escalated from stupid to criminal. In the corner, Colonel Ashford stood, her hand inside her jacket. But Kira had already moved her training, taking over decades of muscle memory, executing techniques that had kept her alive in places these Marines had only heard about. The knife came in low, aimed at her abdomen. Professional attack angle. Carson had some training. Not enough. Kira's left hand deflected the knife arm outward, away from her body. Her right hand came down on his elbow, like a hammer on an anvil. The hyperextension was immediate and catastrophic. Something snapped audibly. Carson screamed. The K-bar clattered to the floor. Kira kicked it away, kept her grip on Carson's now useless arm, forced him to his knees. Silence filled the anchor down. 6 Marines lay scattered across the floor, in various states of injury and consciousness. Staff Sergeant Wyatt Carson knelt before Kira, his broken wrist cradled against his chest, his face pale with pain and shock and the dawning realization of what he'd done, what she'd done. 40 seconds from first contact to complete neutralization. Blood seeped through Kira's jacket from her reopened wound, a dark stain spreading across leather. But she remained standing. Her breathing controlled, her posture relaxed but ready. Master Chief Webster lowered the phone. Military police are en route. The bar's front door opened. Every head turned. Marine Colonel Raymond Hale entered his dress uniform, immaculate despite the late hour. His left leg still showing signs of the injury Kira had carried him through North Africa with just 72 hours earlier. Multiple combat ribbons decorated his chest. Navy Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters. The kind of decorations earned in blood, not ceremony. On your feet, Hale commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who'd led Marines through hell and brought most of them home. All of you, now. The Marines struggled to attention, even the injured ones, even Carson with his shattered wrist. Military discipline overrode pain and humiliation. Hale walked slowly around the scene, taking in the overturned furniture, the scattered glass, the K-bar knife on the floor, Kira's bloodstained jacket. Sir, Carson began, his voice shaking. We were just... Save it, Sergeant Carson. Hale's tone could have frozen the Pacific. I received a phone call from Colonel Ashford approximately 10 minutes ago. She informed me that 6 of my Marines were about to make a mistake they'd regret for the rest of their significantly shortened careers. He turned to face Carson directly. Would you like to know why I'm here, Sergeant? Why I drove from my home at 2300 hours to visit a bar I've never frequented before? Carson remained silent, knowing no answer would help him. I'm here because Lieutenant Kira Blackwood saved my life 72 hours ago. Hale's voice filled the bar. I'm here because she led the SEAL team that extracted me and 14 Marines from a terrorist compound in hostile territory. I'm here because she personally eliminated 4 enemy combatants while carrying my wounded ass to the extraction helicopter. I'm here because that blood on her jacket, she earned it taking shrapnel while protecting me. The color drained from every Marine's face as the truth settled over them like a burial shroud. The mission remains classified, Hale continued, which is the only reason you haven't read about Lieutenant Blackwood's actions in the Navy Times. But let me be absolutely clear about something. He stepped closer to Carson. You didn't attack some diversity hire. You didn't challenge some PR stunt. You assaulted a Navy SEAL who has more combat experience in her pinky finger than your entire fire team has collectively. Carson looked at Kira with horror and dawning shame. Ma'am, at ease, Sergeant. Hale cut him off. You'll have plenty of time to contemplate your mistake during the disciplinary proceedings. Military police arrived their tactical vehicle pulling up outside with lights flashing. 4 MPs entered, assessed the situation instantly. Colonel, the senior MP acknowledged Hale. We received a disturbance call. Escort these Marines to base, Hale ordered. Full incident report. I'll be conducting disciplinary hearings starting at 0600. The MPs moved efficiently, securing the scene, taking statements from witnesses. Carson and his Marines were loaded into the vehicle, their night out ending in handcuffs and shame. Before they took him away, Carson looked back at Kira. Ma'am, I was wrong about everything. Kira held his gaze, saw genuine remorse beneath the pain and humiliation. We all serve the same flag, Sergeant. Remember that next time. The MPs departed, taking their prisoners with them. The bar slowly returned to normal patrons, resuming conversations, pretending they hadn't just witnessed something extraordinary. Colonel Ashford approached her gin and tonic, finally touched half empty. You handled that well. You were watching, Kira said. It wasn't a question. Always. Ashford's smile carried decades of shared history. Your father would have been proud, not because you won that fight, but because you showed restraint. Lesser warriors would have escalated to lethal force. Colonel Hale joined them, gesturing to Master Chief Webster for 3 whiskeys. Lieutenant, you need medical attention. I need this drink more, sir. Hale accepted that logic. They stood together in comfortable silence, 3 warriors who understood that some things didn't need discussion. The whiskey arrived. They raised their glasses in an unspoken toast. To warriors, Ashford said quietly. To warriors, they echoed. The whiskey burned, going down, washing away some of the evening's adrenaline, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion that followed violence. Kira's phone buzzed. Encrypted message source unknown. She glanced at the screen, her blood turning cold. A photograph. Aged edges worn but unmistakable. 3 men in desert camouflage Libya terrain in the background. Her father's face, young and alive, staring out from 1980. She knew the man on his right now. Thomas Brennan, the contractor who died 3 days ago. She knew the man on his left. Kyle Donovan, the other contractor, also dead. The message below the photo read, Your father's death was no accident. Brennan and Donovan can't tell you anymore. But the truth is waiting. Storage Unit 47, San Diego, Self-Storage, Morena Boulevard. A friend. Kira stared at the screen, her mind racing. Her father and the 2 dead contractors had served together in Libya in 1980, the year he died. The phone buzzed again, GPS coordinates. Then the message deleted itself, leaving no trace except the image burned into her memory. Kira, Ashford's voice seemed to come from very far away. What's wrong? She showed them the phone, the blank screen where classified ghosts had momentarily appeared. I need to go, Kira said, already moving toward the door. Hale caught her arm gently. Lieutenant, you're injured. You should, with respect, stare. I need to go now. Something in her voice made him release her, some quality that reminded him of desperate midnights in hostile territory, of missions that couldn't wait for dawn or proper authorization. Ashford followed her outside. I'm coming with you. Diane. Not a request, Kira. Your father asked me to watch over you. That promise doesn't come with office hours. They drove through San Diego's empty streets, following GPS coordinates to a storage facility off Morena Boulevard. A climate-controlled building that catered to military personnel storing gear between deployments. Unit 47 waited in the back corner, combination lock gleaming in fluorescent light. Do you know the code? Ashford asked. Kira tried her father's service number. The lock clicked open. Inside a military footlocker sat a lone olive drab and government-issued, the kind SEALs used to store gear they couldn't explain to civilians. Kira opened it, slowly revealing contents that shouldn't exist. Classified documents stamped destroy after reading. Operation Pharaoh files from 1985. Surveillance photographs of weapons transfers. A leather-bound journal in her father's handwriting. She picked up the journal open to a random page. Stinger missiles disappearing from inventory. Command claims a normal attrition. Numbers don't match. Someone is selling to our enemies. Another page. Traced serial numbers. Are weapons in Soviet hands? Brennan and Donovan confirmed. Trafficking network goes higher than we thought. The final entry dated November 1985, 2 weeks before his death. If my helicopter goes down, it wasn't mechanical failure. I'm too close to exposing them. If you're reading this, finish what I started. Kira looked at Ashford, saw her mentor's face confirm what she already knew. It was murder, Kira whispered. Yes, Ashford said simply. I've suspected for 27 years. Your father asked me to keep this location safe. He made me promise not to tell you unless you found it yourself. Why, because he knew the truth would put you in danger. Because he hoped you'd live a life free from his battles. Ashford's voice carried infinite sadness. But Brennan and Donovan resurfacing means the network is still active. And now they're dead too. Same enemy, same methods, different decade. Kira sat back on her heels, the journal heavy in her hands. Her father hadn't died in a training accident. He'd been murdered for investigating weapons trafficking. Brennan and Donovan had continued that investigation. And 3 days ago, they died for the same reason. Who, she asked, who killed him? I don't know, Ashford admitted. The investigation was classified above top secret, sealed by admirals I couldn't challenge. But this, she gestured to the footlocker. This is your father's case file, everything he knew, everyone he suspected. Kira lifted another folder from the footlocker. Inside names, officers, dates, weapons, serial numbers, financial transactions. A web of corruption spanning decades. And at the center, one name that appeared more than any other. Admiral Jackson Thorne, currently JSOC commander, Gulf War hero, 30 years of distinguished service, and possibly the man who'd murdered her father. Kira's phone buzzed. Colonel Hale. Lieutenant, I need to inform you of something regarding your recent mission. Can we meet tomorrow? It's important. Tomorrow morning, 0700 your office. Kira replied. Affirmative. Sleep well. Sleep, as if that were possible now. Kira looked at the journal in her hands, at the classified documents that shouldn't exist, at evidence of a conspiracy that had lasted longer than she'd been alive. Her father had started this investigation 30 years ago. Brennan and Donovan had continued it. All three had paid with their lives. Now it fell to her to finish what they'd started. She stood gathering the documents, already planning her next move. The bar fight seemed like years ago instead of hours. Carson and his Marines were the least of her concerns now. Somewhere in the military's chain of command, corrupt officers were selling American weapons to America's enemies. They'd been doing it for decades. They'd killed to protect their secret. They'd just made a fatal mistake. They'd killed 2 men who'd served with Kira's father. 2 men whose deaths led her directly to the evidence they tried to bury, and they'd underestimated a SEAL who'd spent her entire life preparing to finish her father's mission. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Dawn broke over San Diego with the kind of cruel beauty that made yesterday's violence seem like a fever dream. Kira stood in her apartment, her father's journal open on the kitchen table, coffee growing cold in her cup. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, reading and rereading entries that painted a picture of corruption so deep it had roots in the Cold War itself. Commander Nathaniel Blackwood had been methodical in his documentation. Dates times serial numbers of missing weapons, Stinger missiles that disappeared from inventory logs, AT-4 rockets shipped to Allied forces that never arrived, M16 rifles diverted from their intended destinations. Small numbers at first, easy to explain as battlefield losses or accounting errors. But over months, the pattern emerged. Weapons weren't being lost. They were being sold. And her father had traced the sales to Soviet-backed groups, terrorist organizations, anyone with enough money and willingness to kill Americans with American weapons. The entries grew more urgent as autumn 1985 progressed. Her father had identified 3 other investigators, Thomas Brennan and Kyle L. Donovan from Army Intelligence, and a 3rd name that made Kira's blood run cold, Captain Jackson Thorne, Navy SEAL, her father's commanding officer. The entries suggested Thorne was helping with the investigation initially, meeting in secure locations, sharing intelligence, building the case together. Then the tone shifted. Thorne is acting strange, avoiding direct questions. His financial disclosures don't match his lifestyle. New car, new watch, offshore accounts he claims are family inheritance. I'm beginning to suspect. The next entry 3 days later. Thorne knows we're close. He's been asking about our evidence, where we keep files, who else knows. I've moved everything to secure location. Told only Diane. If something happens, she'll know anywhere to look. The final entry had been written in what looked like haste, the handwriting less controlled than previous pages. Mission tonight, Libya. Thorne insisted on piloting the helicopter himself, claims regular pilot is sick. I don't believe him. I've prepared for the worst. If you're reading this, I was right to be suspicious. Finish this. Don't let them win. Kira closed the journal, her hands trembling with rage she couldn't fully contain. Captain Jackson Thorne, now Admiral Jackson Thorne, her father's commanding officer, his friend, his murderer, 30 years of distinguished service, hero of Desert Storm, commander of Joint Special Operations Command, untouchable. Her phone rang. Colonel Hale. Lieutenant, my office as discussed. On my way, sir. She drove to Coronado Naval Base, her mind processing scenarios, calculating risks. If Admiral Thorne had been running a weapons trafficking operation for 30 years, he had resources. Protection. People in his pocket at every level of command. Investigating him directly would trigger alarms. She needed to be careful. Strategic. Smart. Colonel Hale's office overlooked the Pacific morning sun glinting off water that stretched to the horizon. He stood when she entered, gesturing to a chair. Lieutenant Blackwood, thank you for coming. Sir, she remained standing. You said this was about my recent mission. Hale studied her for a long moment. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. It goes no further than this room. Understood. Thomas Brennan and Kyle Donovan weren't security contractors. They were Defense Intelligence Agency field operatives investigating weapons trafficking. Hale opened a folder on his desk. They approached me 6 weeks ago, requested protection during their investigation. They believed they were close to exposing a network that had been operating since the Cold War. Kira's pulse quickened. They mentioned it, my father. Hale nodded slowly. They said Commander Nathaniel Blackwood had nearly exposed the same network in 1985. They were picking up where he left off. When I learned you'd be leading the rescue operation, I thought it was coincidence. Now, I'm not so certain. Sir, are you suggesting... I'm suggesting that Brennan and Donovan's presence on that mission wasn't random. I'm suggesting their deaths weren't enemy action. Hale's voice dropped. The grenade that killed them came from the wrong direction. I was there, Lieutenant. I saw the explosion. It came from R6, not from hostile positions. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Someone on our side killed them, Kira said. I believe so. I've been trying to determine who, but investigation has been difficult. Chain of command issues, clearance restrictions. Hale paused. Then last night happened. 6 Marines attack you in a bar. Seems excessive, doesn't it? Almost orchestrated. Kira hadn't considered that angle. You think someone sent them? I think someone has been monitoring you since we returned. I think Carson and his Marines were a test. See how you'd react. See if you'd escalate to lethal force. Give them justification to remove you from the picture. The implications were staggering. If Hale was right, the conspiracy extended beyond Admiral Thorne. It included active personnel, people watching her right now. What do you recommend, sir? Hale closed the folder. Officially nothing. I have no evidence, no proof, just suspicions from an old Marine who's seen too much corruption in his career. He met her eyes. Unofficially, watch your back, Lieutenant. Trust no one. And if you decide to investigate further, I never had this conversation with you. Kira understood. Hale was giving her information and plausible deniability. If she acted on it, he'd deny knowledge. Standard procedure for black operations. Thank you, sir. One more thing. Hale retrieved an envelope from his desk drawer. This was among the effects recovered from the compound. It was sealed, addressed to you specifically. I held it until I could deliver it personally. The envelope bore her name in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it carefully. Inside, a single photograph. Her father, Brennan Donovan, and a fourth man she didn't recognize. Libya, 1985. On the back, a message in faded ink. If you're reading this, we failed. The network is bigger than we thought. Trust Colonel Ashford. She knows everything. Complete the mission. Justice demands it. The signature was her father's. Kira looked up at Hale. How did Brennan have this? I don't know, but I'd guess he's been carrying it for 30 years, waiting for the right moment to deliver it. Hale's expression was grim. That moment arrived 3 days ago when he died doing what your father died doing. Fighting corruption no one else would acknowledge. She left Hale's office with more questions than answers, the photograph burning in her pocket like radioactive material. Her father had planned for his own death, had prepared messages to be delivered decades later, had trusted Diane Ashford with secrets that could destroy careers. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. Lieutenant Blackwood, a male voice, young, nervous. This is Corporal Wyatt Carson from last night. She'd expected official apologies through proper channels, not direct contact. Corporal, ma'am, I need to speak with you. Not officially, not through command. It's about my brother. His voice cracked slightly. Captain Bryce Carson. He died 8 months ago. They said suicide, but I never believed it. Kira's instincts fired. What does this have to do with me? He was investigating something before he died. Weapons inventory discrepancies at Camp Pendleton. He mentioned it might be connected to old Cold War cases. Carson paused. Ma'am, after Colonel Hale told us who you really are, what you did, I looked you up. Your father died in 1985 investigating weapons trafficking. My brother died investigating the same thing. I don't think that's coincidence. Neither did Kira. Where are you, Off base. Coffee shop on Orange Avenue. I have Bryce's personal effects. Things the official investigation didn't find. Things I think you need to see. Protocol said she should report this through proper channels. Instinct said proper channels were compromised. Her father's journal said trust no one except Diane Ashford. But Carson had information. And grief made people do honest things they wouldn't normally do. 20 minutes, Kira said. The coffee shop was civilian territory far enough from base to avoid casual military traffic. Carson sat in the back corner, dressed in civilian clothes, a backpack on the chair beside him. His right wrist was casted from last night's break, his face showing bruises Kira had inflicted. She sat across from him without ordering coffee. Ma'am, I want to apologize again for... Save it, Corporal. You said you have information about your brother. Carson pulled a USB drive from his pocket. Bryce was Marine logistics officer, good at his job, detail-oriented. He noticed weapons going missing from inventory, small numbers easy to explain individually. But over 6 months, the pattern was clear. What kind of weapons? Javelin missiles primarily, also M4 carbines, fragmentation grenades, claymore mines, military hardware that requires significant authorization to move. Carson placed the drive on the table. He documented everything. Serial numbers, requisition forms, authorization signatures. He was building a case. Who did the signatures belong to? That's where it gets complicated. Multiple officers, different ranks, different bases. But when you trace them all back, they connect to one person. Admiral Jackson Thorne at JSOC. There it was. Confirmation. Not proof that would hold up in court, but confirmation that the same name appeared in her father's investigation and her brother's. Your brother confronted someone with this information, Kira said. It wasn't a question. Carson's jaw tightened. He requested meeting with his commanding officer. 2 days later, he's found dead in his quarters. Single gunshot wound to the head. His service weapon beside him. Suicide note that I swear to God he never wrote. The handwriting was wrong. The words were wrong. Bryce would never quit. Ever. Kira had seen enough staged suicides in hostile territory to recognize the description. You kept this investigation secret. I didn't know who to trust. Still don't. But last night, after what Colonel Hale said after seeing what you did, I figured if anyone could help, it's someone whose father died fighting the same fight. Carson met her eyes. Ma'am, I'm asking you to help me prove my brother was murdered. And maybe we can figure out who killed your father at the same time. It was a trap. Had to be. Too convenient. Too perfect. Carson showing up with exactly the information she needed, exactly when she needed it. Except the grief in his eyes was real. The anger was real. and the USB drive represented information someone had killed to protect. Kira took the drive. I'll look at this, but you need to understand something, Corporal. If we pursue this, we're going against people with decades of experience covering their tracks. People who've killed to protect their secret. People who won't hesitate to kill us. Ma'am, they already killed my brother. They already made this personal. Carson's voice was steel wrapped in courtesy. I'm all in, whatever it takes. She recognized that commitment, had felt it herself when she'd opened her father's journal and understood the truth. Some missions you couldn't walk away from even when walking away was the smart choice. Call me Kira. We're past rank if we're doing this. Wyatt, he extended his left hand, his right still casted. Partners. Kira shook his hand. Partners, but we do this smart. No cowboys, no rogue operations. We gather evidence, we build an airtight case, and we bring it to people who can't be compromised. Who can't be compromised? I'm still figuring that out. They left separately, Kira waiting 10 minutes before departing to ensure no one connected them. Standard tradecraft for operations that couldn't be observed. She drove to Colonel Ashford's house, a modest bungalow in Point Loma, with a view of the bay. Diane answered the door in civilian clothes, reading glasses perched on her nose, a book about U-2 reconnaissance missions in her hand. I was wondering when you'd come back, Diane said, ushering her inside. The storage unit wasn't the end of your father's preparations. It was the beginning. Inside, Diane's study had been transformed. Photographs covered one wall connected by red string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except this wasn't theory. This was documentation. I've been building this for 27 years, Diane said quietly. Every piece of evidence your father collected, every suspicious death that might be connected, every officer whose finances don't match their salary, it's all here. Kira studied the wall. Admiral Thorne's photograph sat at the center, connected to dozens of other faces. Some she recognized, some she didn't. How many people are involved? At least 20 officers that I can confirm, probably more I haven't identified. The network spans all service branches, Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force. They move weapons through official channels using legitimate paperwork. The genius is they don't steal. They requisition, they authorize, they transport. Everything looks legal until you examine patterns over decades. And the profit, Diane pointed to a financial chart, conservative estimate $4.7 billion over 30 years. They've sold Stinger missiles to Afghan Mujahideen, who later became Taliban. M4 carbines to Mexican cartels. Javelin missiles to Syrian rebels who defected to ISIS. American weapons have killed American soldiers, and the people responsible wear our uniform and collect military pensions. The scope was staggering. This wasn't some small-time corruption. This was institutional betrayal at the highest levels. We need proof that will hold up in court, Kira said. We need Thorne to expose himself. Diane turned from the wall. Your father tried to gather evidence quietly. They killed him. Brennan and Donovan tried the same approach. They're dead. We need a different strategy. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we make Thorne come to us. We make noise. We rattle cages. We force him to react, and when he does, we document everything. It was aggressive, dangerous, the kind of operation that got people killed. It was also the only way forward. How do we start? Kira asked. Diane smiled, the expression carrying 30 years of patient planning. We already have. The moment you opened that storage unit, security systems I installed sent alerts to people I trust. Defense Intelligence Agency investigators who've been waiting for enough evidence to move against Thorne, FBI agents who specialize in military corruption, JAG officers who want to see justice done properly. You've been preparing for this. Your father asked me to protect you. The best protection isn't hiding you from the truth. It's preparing you to finish what he started. Diane retrieved a laptop from her desk. Wyatt Carson contacted you today, gave you a USB drive. I know because I've been monitoring him since his brother died. Kira should have been surprised, wasn't? You knew about Bryce Carson. I know about every suspicious death in the military over the past 3 decades. Bryce was investigating the same network. His death was murder made to look like suicide. Wyatt has been searching for answers. You're his best hope. Or his biggest risk. Both. Ma, Diane inserted the USB drive into her laptop. Let's see what Captain Carson discovered. The files were comprehensive. Spreadsheets tracking weapons movements, scanned documents showing requisition forms with forged signatures, financial records indicating offshore payments to logistics officers who'd facilitated transfers, and video files. Security footage from Camp Pendleton warehouses showing weapons being loaded into civilian trucks at night. Footage that shouldn't exist because official cameras were supposedly malfunctioning during those exact time periods. Bryce Carson had been smart. He'd installed his own cameras. The footage showed faces, officers supervising transfers, civilian contractors handling weapons, and in one crucial frame, a figure in shadow giving orders. Diane froze the image, enhanced it using software that probably wasn't legal for civilian use. The face resolved into clarity. Commander Dalton Hayes, Kira's direct superior, SEAL team commander, decorated warrior with impeccable record, and weapons trafficker working for Admiral Thorne. He's been watching you, Diane said, since you returned from North Africa, making sure you don't ask the wrong questions, making sure you don't connect the dots between Brennan's death and your father's investigation. Kira felt cold fury settle into her bones. Hayes had sent her on that mission knowing Brennan and Donovan would die, had positioned her to witness their deaths probably hoping she'd blame enemy action and never investigate further. He'd miscalculated. Badly. We have proof now, Kira said. Hayes on video, financial records, weapons movements. We can take this to... Her phone rang. Diane's rang simultaneously. Then Wyatt Carson's number lit up Kira's screen with a text message. Being followed. 2 vehicles. Need help. Diane was already moving, grabbing a go bag from her closet. Inside weapons, communications gear, first aid supplies. The preparations of someone who'd been ready for this moment for decades. Where is he? Diane demanded. Kira checked the text location. Interstate 5 northbound, approaching La Jolla. They took Diane's car, a nondescript sedan with modifications that weren't factory standard. Enhanced engine, run-flat tires, communication equipment that would make intelligence agencies jealous. Call for backup, Kira said, already dialing Colonel Hale. No, Diane said sharply. We don't know who's compromised. The moment we call official channels, we might be calling the people hunting Wyatt. She was right. If Hayes was compromised, how many others were? How deep did this corruption run? They found Wyatt's truck pulled over on the shoulder hazards flashing. No sign of pursuit vehicles. No sign of Wyatt. Kira exited with her Sig Sauer drawn, scanning for threats. Diane covered her from the driver's seat, a Glock 40 in her hands with the casual competence of someone who'd pointed weapons at Soviet fighters at 70,000 feet. Wyatt's truck was empty, keys in the ignition, phone on the passenger seat, no signs of struggle, no blood, professional snatch, quick, clean, executed by people with training and resources. Kira's phone buzzed, text from unknown number. Lieutenant Blackwood, we have Corporal Carson. He's unharmed for now. You have something we want. The USB drive, your father's journal, all evidence related to Operation Pharaoh. Deliver it to Port of Long Beach, Container 47B, midnight tonight. Come alone. If you involve authorities, Carson dies. If you bring backup, Carson dies. If you're late, Carson dies. This is your only chance to pick at him. Second text arrived. A photograph. Wyatt Carson bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, blood trickling from his nose, fear in his eyes, but defiance in his jaw. They had him. And they were using him as bait to recover evidence that could destroy them. Diane read the message over Kira's shoulder. It's a trap, obviously. They'll kill both of you and recover the evidence. I know. So we don't go. We take what we have to DIA, let them handle it. They'll kill Wyatt the moment we involve authorities. He's one Marine. The evidence could bring down dozens of corrupt officers. From a strategic standpoint, from a human standpoint, I don't leave people behind. Kira met Diane's eyes. That's what separates us from them. They see assets and liabilities. We see people worth saving. Diane studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Your father said the same thing once, right before he walked into the mission that killed him. She holstered her weapon. If we're doing this, we do it smart. We bring backup they won't see. We document everything. And we make sure that even if they kill us, the evidence survives. They had 12 hours to plan an operation against an enemy that had been killing people successfully for 30 years. Kira had faced worse odds, barely, but she'd faced them and survived. Tonight would determine if her luck held, or if she'd join her father in a grave marked with lies and official regrets. The 12 hours between Wyatt's abduction and the midnight deadline passed with the methodical precision of a bomb countdown. Kira sat in Diane's study surrounded by evidence that represented 30 years of corruption and murder planning, an operation that would either expose the truth or get them all killed. Probably both. Colonel Hale arrived at 1400 hours, entering through the back door with the cautious movements of a man who understood surveillance. He'd come alone in civilian clothes, driving a borrowed car. His left leg still showed signs of the wound Kira had carried him through North Africa with, but his mind was sharp as ever. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into a chair that creaked under his weight. Kira laid out the evidence. Her father's journal, Bryce Carson's USB drive, the photograph from Brennan, the video footage showing Commander Hayes supervising weapons transfers, the financial records connecting everything to Admiral Thorne. Hale studied each piece with the attention of a man who'd spent 40 years in uniform watching good people corrupted by power and money. "This is enough for court-martial proceedings," he said finally. "Multiple counts of treason, conspiracy, weapons trafficking. They'd all face life in Leavenworth or death penalty. If we can get it to people who aren't compromised," Diane added, "the network extends into every branch. We don't know who we can trust." "You can trust me," Hale said simply. "I know you have no reason to believe that, but I've been investigating Admiral Thorne for 2 years. Defense Intelligence Agency recruited me after my capture in North Africa. That mission wasn't random, Lieutenant. I went into that compound deliberately, let myself be taken, waited for rescue. All to get close to you." Kira felt the words like a physical blow. "You used me." "I assessed you," Hale corrected. "DIA needed someone outside Thorne's network. Someone with motivation to see justice done. Someone with the skills to survive what was coming. Your father's daughter seemed like the logical choice. Then I watched you carry me under fire, watched you eliminate hostiles while wounded, watched you complete the mission despite impossible odds. I didn't need to assess you anymore. I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were exactly who we needed to bring Thorne down." Hale pulled a slim folder from inside his jacket. "Thomas Brennan and Kyle Donovan weren't just investigators. They were bait. We exposed them deliberately, knowing Thorne would try to eliminate them. We documented everything. Their deaths gave us grounds to move against him." The cold calculation of it made Kira's stomach turn. "You let them die. They volunteered, both of them. They knew your father knew what he'd tried to do. They wanted to finish it, even if it cost their lives." Hale's expression was granite. "Brennan's last words to me were, 'Make sure Blackwood's daughter completes the mission.' Those were his final thoughts. Not fear, not regret, just determination that this time the corruption would be exposed." Diane stood at the window watching the street for surveillance. "If you're DIA, you have resources. Backup. Why do we need to walk into Thorne's trap tonight? Because Wyatt Carson has leverage we can't ignore. And because Thorne won't expose himself unless he believes he's won. Tonight at the port, he'll be there personally. First time in 30 years he's taken a direct operational role. He's scared, desperate, making mistakes." Hale opened the folder revealing surveillance photos. "We have teams positioned around the port, FBI hostage rescue, DIA tactical operators, JAG prosecutors with arrest warrants. The moment Thorne reveals himself, we have him." "And if he kills Wyatt before you can intervene?" Kira asked. "That's a risk we have to accept." "No." Kira stood, her decision made. "That's a risk you have to accept. I'm not sacrificing Wyatt to make your case easier. We go in, we get him out, and we make sure Thorne and Hayes answer for everything they have done." Hale studied her, then nodded slowly. "Your father said something similar once. I told him it would get him on. He told me some things were worth dying for." He pulled out a tactical radio. "I won't order you to stand down, but I will give you every resource I can to make sure you survive. Deal." "Deal." They spent the next 6 hours planning. Diane provided detailed maps of Port of Long Beach from her personal intelligence collection. Container 47B sat in a relatively isolated section surrounded by other containers that would provide cover or concealment for hostiles. Multiple approach routes, multiple escape routes, multiple opportunities for ambush. Kira studied the layout with the focus she'd learned at SEAL training, seeing angles and sight lines and choke points. They'll have overwatch positions here, here, and here, she indicated 3 container stacks. Probably 10 to 15 hostiles total. Hayes will be there, maybe Thorne if he's desperate enough. Thorne will be there, Hale said with certainty. This is his endgame. 30 years of operation exposed. He needs to recover that evidence and eliminate everyone who knows the truth. He can't delegate this. Good, Kira said. Let him come. Let him think he's winning right until the moment we take him down. Diane handed her a tactical vest ceramic plates capable of stopping rifle rounds. Your father wore this in Libya. It didn't save him, but maybe it'll protect you. The weight of it settled on Kira's shoulders like history and responsibility combined. She checked her weapons. Sig Sauer P2226 with 4 magazines, her father's Randall knife, a backup Glock 19 at ankle holster, enough firepower to fight her way through hell if necessary. At 2300 hours, Kira's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. 1 hour, Lieutenant. Come alone. Park at the south entrance. Walk to container 47B. We'll be watching. Any sign of backup, any hint of tactical teams, and Carson dies screaming. His blood will be on your hands. She texted back a simple acknowledgement. Hale's radio crackled. All units in position. HRT has eyes on target location. Count 15 hostiles, correction 17. They're well armed, M4 carbines, body armor, professional deployment. Commander Hayes, Kira asked. Confirmed, Hayes is on site directing placement. No sign of Admiral Thorne yet. But he'd come. Men like Thorne always had to see their victories personally. Diane drove Kira to the port in silence, the kind of quiet that fell between warriors before battle. At the south entrance, she pulled over, let the engine idle. Your father asked me to protect you, Diane said. I'm breaking that promise by letting you do this. You're honoring it by giving me the choice, Kira replied. He didn't raise me to hide from fights. He raised me to finish them. Then finish it, for him, for Brennan and Donovan, for Bryce Carson, for every warrior who died because corrupt officers valued profit over honor. Diane's hand found Kira's squeezed once. And come back alive, because I've lost too many people I cared about to this fight already. Kira exited the vehicle, began the long walk toward container 47B. The port sprawled around her metal containers, stacked like building blocks, shadows deep enough to hide armies. Sodium lights cast everything in orange and black, turning the world into stark contrasts without nuance. Her radio earpiece, concealed and encrypted, carried Hale's voice. You're on camera, multiple angles. They're watching every step. Good, Kira murmured. Let them watch. She walked with the casual confidence of someone who'd cleared rooms in Fallujah and Kandahar, who'd survived firefights that killed better warriors, who carried her father's legacy and refused to dishonor it with fear. Container 47B sat exactly where the maps indicated, isolated, surrounded by stacked containers that created artificial canyons. The perfect kill zone. Anyone approaching would be exposed, vulnerable, easy to eliminate. The container door stood open. Light spilled from inside. Kira entered. Wyatt Carson sat bound to a chair in the center, his face showing fresh bruises, blood dried on his split lip, but his eyes were clear, alert, tracking movement in the shadows. Commander Dalton Hayes stepped from those shadows, an M4 carbine in his hands, barrel pointed casually at Wyatt's head. Lieutenant Blackwood, punctual as always. Behind Hayes, 12 more figures emerged, all in tactical gear, all armed, all positioned to create a crossfire that would turn Kira into hamburger if she tried anything aggressive. Let him go, Kira said. You want the evidence. I have it. Make the trade. Oh, we will, Hayes smiled. Right after Admiral Thorne arrives. He's been very eager to meet you, to explain personally why your father had to die. Professional courtesy, you might say. My father was worth 10 of you, Kira said, her voice flat and cold. He was a warrior. You're just a criminal in uniform. Hayes' smile vanished. Your father was a naive fool who couldn't understand that real patriots do what's necessary. We've equipped freedom fighters across the globe, helped allies defend themselves when official channels failed, made America stronger through strength. You've armed terrorists who killed Americans. You've enriched yourselves on blood money. You're traitors, and you know it. Traitor is such a limited word, a new voice said. Admiral Jackson Thorne entered the container, and Kira felt 30 years of rage condense into a single moment of crystalline hatred. He was 62 but moved like 50, his uniform pressed, imperfect ribbons covering his chest like armor made of accolades and lies. Lieutenant Kira Blackwood, Thorne said, studying her like a specimen. You have your father's eyes, his stubborn loyalty to outdated concepts of honor. I hoped you'd be smarter, hoped you'd accept your medal and move on with your career. But you're investigating, asking questions, making connections we spent decades burying. You killed my father, Kira said. I eliminated a threat to national security, Thorne corrected. Your father would have exposed an operation that provided critical weapons to anti-Soviet forces, would have damaged America's ability to fight the Cold War through proxies. I made the hard choice, the patriotic choice. You sabotaged his helicopter, murdered him in cold blood. There's nothing patriotic about that. Patriotism isn't clean, Lieutenant. It's messy and complicated and sometimes requires sacrifice. Your father's sacrifice enabled us to continue operations that shaped the modern world. The Mujahideen we armed defeated the Soviets in Afghanistan. That was us. That was this network. We won the Cold War. And then you kept selling, Kira said, even after the Cold War ended, even when those same Mujahideen became Taliban and Al-Qaeda, even when your weapons started killing American soldiers. You didn't stop because you couldn't give up the money. Thorne's expression hardened. Enough philosophy, the evidence, now. Or I'll have Commander Hayes put a bullet in Corporal Carson's brain and we'll search your corpse. Kira reached slowly into her tactical vest, pulled out the USB drive Wyatt had given her. This is everything Bryce Carson collected. Weapons movements, financial records, video evidence. She tossed it to Thorne. He caught it, examined it briefly, nodded to Hayes. Hayes raised his M4, pressed the barrel against Wyatt's temple. Wait, Kira said. I have more. My father's journal. Original documents from Operation Pharaoh. They're hidden. Kill us now, you'll never find them. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Where? Release Wyatt first. You're not negotiating from a position of strength, Lieutenant. You're surrounded by 17 of my people. You're outgunned, outmaneuvered. Tell me where the documents are or watch your new friend die. Kira's radio earpiece crackled. Hale's voice urgent. Kira, FBI is moving in 30 seconds. Hold position. 30 seconds. An eternity in tactical operations. The documents are at Fort Rosecrans, Kira said, improvising buying time. My father's grave, buried with him. You want them, you'll have to dig up a war hero and explain why. Thorne considered this clearly, trying to determine if she was lying. Hayes confirmed. Does that make sense? Hayes lowered his weapon from Wyatt's head, pulled out a phone, started making calls. 20 seconds. Movement outside the container. Shadows shifting. Professional and quiet, but Kira's trained eyes caught them. FBI hostage rescue team moving into position. Thorne saw her expression change, understood instantly. It's a trap. Kill them both. Hayes swung at his M4 toward Wyatt. Kira moved. Her Sig Sauer cleared leather in a smooth draw practiced 10,000 times. 2 rounds center mass before Hayes could fire. He dropped, surprise frozen on his face. Thorne dove for cover as the container erupted in gunfire. Kira rolled behind a steel support pillar as rounds sparked off metal around her. Wyatt threw himself backward chair, and all getting horizontal as bullets passed overhead. FBI, drop your weapons! The shout came from outside, amplified by bullhorns. Thorne's men hesitated, caught between following orders and self-preservation. That hesitation was fatal for 3 of them as FBI operators breached the container from multiple entry points. Flashbangs destroying night vision, precision shots, eliminating hostile threats. Kira engaged 2 hostiles advancing on Wyatt's position. 4 rounds, 2 headshots, clean kills. She moved to Wyatt, cut his restraints with her father's knife. Stay down. The firefight was brief but intense. FBI hostage rescue didn't negotiate with the armed hostiles threatening their operators. Within 40 seconds, 12 of Thorne's men were down dead or wounded. The remaining 5 surrendered weapons clattering to the ground, hands raised. But Thorne was gone. Kira scanned the container, found the rear exit door standing open. Thorne had run the moment shooting started, leaving his men to die while he escaped. Coward's tactics from a coward wearing a hero's uniform. She sprinted through the door, emerged into the container yard, weapon up and scanning. 50 yards away, Thorne was running toward a vehicle moving fast for a man his age. "Thorne, stop!" Kira's shout carried across the port. He turned, raised a pistol, fired 3 wild shots. None came close. Panic shooting accuracy destroyed by adrenaline and fear. Kira's return fire was controlled. Professional, 1 round through his right shoulder, spinning him around, the pistol flying from his hand. He collapsed against a container, clutching his wound, blood seeping between his fingers. She approached carefully, weapon trained on his center mass, aware that wounded animals were most dangerous. But Thorne wasn't fighting anymore. He was crying, tears cutting through the tough exterior he'd maintained for 30 years. "You don't understand," he gasped. "The money wasn't for me. It was for operations. Black budget programs Congress wouldn't fund. We did necessary work." "You murdered my father," Kira said, standing over him. "You killed Brennan and Donovan. You destroyed Bryce Carson. How many others? How many warriors died because you valued profit over honor?" "I'm a patriot," Thorne insisted weakly. "Everything I did was for America. Patriots don't sell weapons to terrorists. Patriots don't murder their own people. Patriots don't spend 30 years enriching themselves on blood money." Kira holstered her weapon, pulled out zip ties. "You're just a criminal who hid behind a flag. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell thinking about everyone you betrayed." FBI agents swarmed the area, securing the scene, treating wounded, documenting evidence. Colonel Hale approached, his limp more pronounced from exertion, a satisfied expression on his weathered face. "Clean operation, Lieutenant, by the book. Textbook takedown." "How many did we lose?" Kira asked. 2 FBI agents wounded, none critical. All hostiles accounted for. Commander Hayes is dead. Admiral Thorne in custody. Hale looked at the man who'd orchestrated 3 decades of corruption. "It's over." But it wasn't. Not quite. Over the next 72 hours, the dominoes fell with devastating precision. FBI executed warrants across 15 military installations. 23 officers arrested, ranging from captains to a 2-star general. Financial assets seized totaling $4.2 billion. Weapons recovered from illegal sales spanning 3 continents. The scandal rocked the Pentagon. Congressional hearings were announced. The Secretary of Defense resigned. Joint Chiefs conducted internal reviews of every procurement authorization from the past 30 years. And in a classified ceremony at Coronado Naval Base, Kira Blackwood received her 2nd Navy Cross, this one for exposing corruption that threatened national security. The citation was vague, details classified, but everyone in attendance understood what it represented. Justice for Commander Nathaniel Blackwood. Justice for Thomas Brennan and Kyle Donovan. Justice for Bryce Carson and every other warrior who died fighting an enemy wearing American uniforms. Wyatt Carson attended the ceremony. His wrist healed, his bruises faded, his expression, carrying the peace of someone who'd seen his brother's name cleared and honor restored. He completed SEAL training, graduated top of his class, and requested assignment to Kira's team. Colonel Diane Ashford received formal recognition for her 30-year investigation, though she declined any ceremony. "I just kept a promise to a friend," she said simply. "That's what warriors do." 6 months after the operation, Kira stood in front of a mixed class of Navy SEALs and Marines teaching advanced close-quarters combat techniques at Coronado. 50 warriors watched her demonstrate principles her father had taught her decades ago. "I'm going to tell you something most instructors won't," Kira said, her boys carrying across the silent training deck. "The enemy doesn't care about your politics, your background, or your grievances. But your greatest enemy isn't always the one shooting at you from across a battlefield. Sometimes it's corruption within our own ranks. People who took an oath to protect and defend, then twisted that oath to serve themselves." She let that sink in, watched 50 faces process the hard truth. When you encounter that corruption, you have 2 choices. Look away and become complicit, or stand up and fight knowing it might cost everything. She pulled out her father's dog tags. Commander Nathaniel Blackwood chose to fight. She pulled out her father's dog tags, held them so the class could see. Commander Nathaniel Blackwood chose to fight. It cost him everything. But 30 years later, his fight mattered. His sacrifice exposed corruption that had killed American warriors. His courage inspired others to finish what he started. She returned the tags to her pocket. That's the legacy every warrior should aspire to. Not medals or promotions or glory, but the knowledge that when it mattered, when everything was at risk, you stood for what was right. The class absorbed this in silence, understanding they'd just received something more valuable than any tactical technique. They'd received the philosophy that separated warriors from soldiers, heroes from victims. After class, Kira returned to her office, found a thick folder on her desk. Classified markings, Defense Intelligence Agency seal. Inside, a new mission brief. Suspicious weapons movements at Fort Bragg. Pattern matching similar to Thorne's network. Possible remaining cells still operational. A note from Colonel Hale. The fight continues. Are you ready? Kira looked at her father's photograph on the desk. Young alive, standing with his SEAL team in a photo taken weeks before his death. He was smiling, confident, ready for whatever mission came next. She picked up her phone, dialed Hale's number. I'm ready. Brief me on Fort Bragg. Because some warriors don't fight for recognition or reward. They fight because when darkness rises, someone has to stand against it. Someone has to carry the torch, passed from generation to generation. Someone has to honor the fallen by continuing their mission. Her father had started this fight in 1985. Had given his life trying to expose corruption others refused to acknowledge. Brennan and Donovan had continued it, dying in service of truth. Bryce Carson had discovered it independently, paying with his life for daring to question authority. Now it fell to Kira to ensure their sacrifices meant something, to hunt down remaining corruption, to stand as guardian against those who betray their oaths for profit. The mission never truly ended. It just changed hands, passed from warrior to warrior, each generation taking up the burden and carrying it forward. Before preparing for Fort Bragg, Kira drove to Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery. The Pacific stretched endlessly beyond the white headstones, the same view her father had loved during his years at Coronado. She knelt at Commander Nathaniel Blackwood's grave, placed a small item beside the fresh flowers someone else had left. Her Navy Cross medal, the one she'd received for the North Africa mission. You started with nothing but suspicion and courage, she said quietly. Took me 30 years, but I finished it. Thorne's in custody. Hayes is dead. 23 of them arrested. The network's broken. The Pacific wind carried the scent of salt and distance. I'm heading to Fort Bragg tomorrow. Possible remaining cells. The fight doesn't end, does it? She touched his headstone. But that's okay. You taught me warriors don't choose easy roads. They choose right ones. She stood, left the medal there. He'd earned it more than she had. His investigation, his sacrifice, his courage across decades had made everything possible. Mission continues, Dad. Always. The next morning, she gathered her gear and prepared for Fort Bragg. Wyatt Carson appeared in her doorway, his own gear ready, his expression determined. Heard we have a mission, he said. We do. Could be dangerous. Could get complicated. Commander, with respect, when has that ever stopped us? Kira smiled, recognizing her own words reflected back at her. This was how legacies were built. Not through grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but through steady commitment to doing what was right, mission after mission, day after day. Let's go to work, she said. They walked together through Coronado Naval Base, two warriors among thousands, nothing special in their appearance or bearing. But they carried something rare, something precious, something worth more than all the medals and commendations the military could bestow. They carried the knowledge that when it mattered, when everything was at risk, when the easy path was to look away and the hard path was to stand and fight, they'd chosen to stand. Their fathers would have been proud. The mission continued, and somewhere in a military cemetery overlooking the Pacific, Commander Nathaniel Blackwood rested beneath a headstone marked with his name and rank and the simple epitaph, "He stood for honor." His daughter would do the same, always.